Hello, and welcome to Dreamy History. As the world outside quiets down and the night embraces your room with its soft shadows, it's time to ease your mind into rest. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in, dim the lights, gently lay your head on your pillow. Let the blanket cover you like a soft mist drifting through the evening air. Loosen your jaw, drop your shoulders, and exhale the tension of the day. This evening, we'll drift back to the 18th century, to the cobbled streets, muddy paths, and quiet courtyards of France, where a quiet revolution was taking place. Not one of kings or guillotines, but of water. In this episode, we'll gently wander through the evolution of water distribution infrastructure, pipes, wells, aqueducts, and pumps. They quietly reshaped everyday life long before modern plumbing became a norm. So let the slow, steady current of history wash over you, like water trickling through stone channels beneath the cities of old. Now, let's begin. The day begins not with an alarm clock, but with the soft creaking of floorboards and the rustling of woolen skirts. In a small French village, perhaps in Normandy, or perhaps in Auvergne, the sun has only barely begun its slow ascent. The morning air remains cool, damp, and still. Chickens cluck softly in the distance. A dog yawns. A crow's voice echoes from a nearby field. At the heart of the village stands the communal fountain. Not a grand fountain of marble, nor one adorned with bronze or mythic creatures, but a simple stone structure, roughly circular, with a single iron spout emerging from its center. The water flows slowly, never in a rushy, merging from the underground spring that feeds it, one that has done so, most likely, for over a century. Women arrive in ones and twos, their footsteps muffled by soft leather shoes and worn wooden soles. They carry wooden yokes on their shoulders, heavy, even when empty, each with two iron-ringed buckets hanging from either side. The yoke allows them to carry water with a measure of balance, though the weight will still bow their backs slightly with each trip. The women wait their turn quietly. There is no rush, and indeed no way to rush. The water does not respond to urgency. It flows, as it always has, steadily, monotonously. Each woman steps forward when it is her turn, lifting a bucket under the spout, waiting patiently as the trickle fills it. The sound of water hitting wood is soft, repetitive, rhythmic. Conversations are muted. Greetings are murmured. Topics are often the same as the day before. The bread baked, the child with fever, the goat who wandered too far. These exchanges are secondary. The task at hand is water. The stone around the fountain is wet and green, in places with moss. The base is slick from years of spills. Some women wear cloth gloves, though most work with bare hands, their fingers already raw from the cold. The water is colder, still clear, slightly metallic, and not entirely clean. But it is water. It takes time, several minutes per bucket. Some buckets leak slightly, some handles creak. Still, the task continues, as it always has, and will again tomorrow. Once both buckets are filled, the woman adjusts her stance, balances the load, and begins the slow walk back to her home. Others step forward. The process repeats. The sound of dripping water, the squeak of wood, and the shuffling of feet provide the only music to this quiet morning. There is nothing new, nothing urgent, only the steady, enduring ritual of drawing water. The interior of a modest 18th century French home is dim. The windows are small, and the panes are of poor glasswavy, often fogged and prone to condensation. Light enters unevenly. The beams overhead are low, worn smooth by time, darkened by soot from decades of cooking smoke. The walls are thick, made of stone or wattle and daub, coated in lime plaster that occasionally crumbles at the edges. A table, rough-hewn and uneven, stands near the hearth. A ceramic, jug-glazed but chipped sits upon it. From this jug, water is poured into a shallow clay basin. The process is done slowly. The jug is heavy when full and fragile in the hands. The basin, cracked at the rim, holds only a small amount of water, and the water within is cold. A child stands beside the table, waiting. She is small, perhaps 7 or 8, barefoot, with tangled hair and sleeves rolled up. Her mother hands her a coarse cloth, soaked lightly in the water. The child wipes her face. There is no soap. Soap is saved for laundry days, and even then, it is harsh and rarely used in quantity. After face washing, the water in the basin is reused for other tasks. The same water might next be poured into a smaller pot, used for scrubbing vegetables or cleaning wooden utensils. Or it might be ladled into another vessel to rinse soiled cloths. Only after multiple uses does it become water for the floor spread with a broom of straw, used to tame dust and soften dirt. The concept of single-use water does not exist in this home. Water is fetched with effort. It is carried with pain. Every drop matters. The woman of the house manages this carefully. Buckets are lined up against a wall, each with a different purpose. One for cooking, one for washing, one for the animals, one for the garden if rain does not come. Near the fireplace, a pot hangs from a swinging arm of iron. It is blackened by years of use. Into it, eventually, water will be added, mixed with grains or vegetables for boiling, but not yet. The day is only beginning. Outside, another member of the household returns with more water. The door creaks open, a breeze passes through. Another bucket is emptied into a jug. The floor is damp. A child slips, recovers, and continues playing. Nothing happens quickly. Everything happens again. The process of fetching, pouring, using, and reusing water repeats daily, hourly, unendingly. Each act is small. Each action matters. The rhythm of this life is shaped not by bells or clocks, but by the pace of water and the labor it demands. In larger towns, where distance made self-fetching impractical, water carriers, known as porteur, doorer, employed to deliver water directly to homes. Each morning, they followed predictable paths through cobbled streets, pushing wooden carts fitted with 2 or more barrels. These barrels were bound in iron, often old wine casks repurposed for utility. The carriers, usually men of modest means, began at public fountains or wells, filling each container slowly by hand before beginning their route. The water sloshed quietly as the cartwheels rolled always slowly over uneven stones. Customers left payment in the form of sous or simple bartering goods, a loaf of bread, a handful of wool, sometimes a promise. There were no receipts, no urgency. Each delivery followed the same rhythm. Door knock, wait, exchange, move on. The water was transferred into clay jugs or stored in buckets within kitchens or cellars. The work was repetitive, unremarkable, and continuous. By midday, the barrels were empty and the path reversed. Every village, regardless of size, depended on the functionality of its well. When the well faltered, when the rope snapped, or the pulley froze, or the stone lining cracked, the rhythm of the village paused. A local artisan, often also a carpenter or cooper, was summoned. His tools were few: a crowbar, lengths of rope, a hammer, and patience. Repair meant lowering oneself into the darkness, checking for obstructions, and sealing leaks with tar-soaked cloth or animal fat mixed with clay. The pulley was inspected for wood rot. If needed, the entire rope had to be replaced, processed that could take half a day. Villagers stood nearby, watching, waiting. Few spoke. There was nothing to do but wait. Water was not just a resource, it was a timetable. Without it, baking paused, washing was delayed, and thirst became immediate, a working, well-restored order. Once repaired, the artisan departed without ceremony, his tools damp, his fingers chilled, and the villagers resumed their routines. In many towns, especially where water sources were scarce or contested, the local church managed access to wells or fountains. Religious oversight was not symbolic, it was logistical. A wooden sign near the water source displayed posted hours, written in fading paint or carved Latin. The rules governed who could draw water, how much, and when. During dry months, restrictions tightened. On feast days, usage was briefly suspended. A friar or monk, tasked with overseeing the fountain, carried a small ledger where he noted violations. Infractions were rare but not forgotten. The community abided partly from faith, mostly from necessity. Those who disobeyed might lose access for days. It was not cruelty, merely structure. The well or fountain belonged to the community, but its flow was regulated to prevent depletion. Bells marked opening hours. A soft clang drew the queue forward. The ritual was part of life, solemn, orderly, and predictable. Water came not only through stone, but through the permissions granted above it. Once the buckets were full, the return journey began. The walk was slow. The weight of water, often 20 to 30 pounds per bucket, pulled at the shoulders, pressing down through the yoke or fraying rope handles. The road home was familiar, uneven, narrow, bordered by hedges or shuttered storefronts. Along the way, some women paused to rest on stone benches, shifting the burden slightly, but never setting it down completely. Spills were inevitable. A stumble here, a splash there. Children sometimes followed, either helping by carrying smaller vessels or simply accompanying their mothers. Few spoke. The sound of footsteps and water sloshing created a soft rhythm. Each return was a repetition of the day before, and the day before that. The house waited quietly. Once home, the water was portioned, part for boiling, part for drinking, part to store. The journey would repeat in a few hours. Water was not a task completed, was a task maintained, constant, cyclical, where no fountain or well existed nearby. Women gathered at the riverbank to do their washing. The river served many purposes: drinking water upstream, laundry midstream, and waste disposal farther down. At the midsection, flat stones were used as tables. Buckets were tipped, garments soaked, and paddles brought down in dull, even strikes. The rhythm of cleaning was meditative. Water flowed past, unchanged, indifferent. Soap, when used, was harsh, made from ash and lye. Most garments were wool or linen, heavy when wet, requiring effort to rinse. Women knelt for hours, their hands reddened, their clothes damp from mist and splash. Conversation occurred in murmurs, punctuated by shared sighs. Birds fluttered nearby, children played quietly in the shallows. The task, while social, was not joyful. It was work. The river took the dirt, carried it away, and asked nothing. When finished, the wet garments were laid across bushes or carried home in sacks. By evening, they would be hung indoors to dry, silently. Jacques-Ange Gabriel's early years were not marked by grandeur or fame, but by repetition and silence. In his father's workshop in Paris, he learned the craft not through lectures, but through observation. Each morning, he was tasked with copying the same architectural motifs over and over: arches, domes, column orders, each drawn in precise, unvarying strokes. The tools were simple: chalk, a straightedge, and measuring string. Mistakes were erased slowly with damp cloth. The workshop smelled faintly of sawdust and drying ink. Occasionally, he was permitted to mix the glue that held paper models together, stirring patiently for long minutes until the mixture thickened. Conversation was sparse, limited to corrections. At the end of each day, drawings were stacked neatly in pigeonholes, their edges smudged, but lines intact. This process continued for years. There were no certificates, no ceremonies, only quiet progress. Over time, Jacques absorbed proportions, alignments, and patience. He became not just skilled, but careful enough to build for kings. The gardens of Versailles were vast, but Jacques found his interest not in the sculptures above ground, but in the waterworks below. He walked the grounds daily, charting the routes of gravity-fed systems that carried water from distant hills to ornate fountains. The systems were largely invisible underground channels, wooden pipes lined with tar, stone culverts adjusted with levers. Each fountain required pressure, but not too much. Flow was constant, but measured. He recorded these details in a bound notebook, marking the rise and fall of terrain in careful increments. He often noted the time it took water to reach a given outlet after activations, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes more. The pipes sang faintly as water passed through, a low hum detectable only when standing directly above. Jacques would pause, often, listening, adjusting, then continuing. He did not modify the system, yet only studied it. Knowledge came not through bold action, but through long observation. He learned by watching water do what it always did: move. When Jacques was finally summoned to present his design for a new garden fountain, the room he entered was formal but quiet. The king's advisors sat along a long table, wigs powdered, hands folded, documents unread. Jacques laid out his plans without ceremony. The parchment was heavy, drawn in ink mixed with iron gall. The lines were precise. Each pipe angle, each slope, each return valve was labeled in legible, rigid script. He did not speak at length. He described the gradient, the water source, the materials, mostly lined piping and quarried stone. He spoke in numbers: slope of 2 inches per 10 feet, flow rate of 12 liters per minute. No one interrupted. The advisors nodded once or twice, but said little. After a short pause, they requested a second copy of the plan to be sent to the engineer of fountains. That was all. Jacques rolled his parchment slowly and exited. It was not triumph, it was simply completion. Approval was silent. The construction of underground channels was neither exciting nor fast. Workers dug in teams, removing 1 foot of soil at a time, lining the trench with rough-cut stones. Jacques visited the site daily, marking the incline with a weighted line, then checking again using water itself, pouring small amounts and noting its path. Soil types were catalogued: sandy, silty, or clay-heavy. Where roots threatened collapse, wood planks were installed. The pipes, made of hollowed tree trunks or molded ceramic, were sealed with hemp and beeswax. Jacques inspected each section before burial. No celebration marked the laying of pipe, only a silent nod and slow refilling of the trench. The channels were mapped on parchment and stored in a drawer few ever opened. Once covered, the channels vanished from view, remembered only by Jacques and the laborers, but they worked. Water flowed through them with no sound, through darkness, feeding fountains few knew how to maintain. Success was invisibility. One winter, the pipes beneath the orangery froze. A sudden frost had set in overnight, expanding water into brittle ice, which cracked joints and split seams. The fountains ceased. Water pooled near the base of statues, then vanished. Jacques walked the length of the system that morning, making notes in gloved hands. He said little. Solutions were not dramatic, they were structural. He proposed widening joints to allow expansion, burying the most vulnerable lines deeper, insulating exposed valves with layers of wool and waxed cloth. He implemented these changes slowly, over the course of weeks. Each fix was tested, observed, recorded. The system returned to function, not all at once, but gradually. Some fountains sputtered before flowing. Others resumed without issue. There was no applause, no ceremony, just the return of flow. Water moved again through stone, across marble, past indifferent cherubs. Jacques returned to his notebook and continued his rounds. Winter would come again. The pipes would be ready. When Jacques-Ange Gabriel passed in 1782, his funeral was modest. A procession moved slowly through the city's quiet quarter. His coffin was simple, as was the inscription on the stone above. Name, date, profession. No mention of fountains, no list of projects. He was buried in earth that once held pipes he may have designed, though none remembered precisely. Years passed. His architecture remained buildings, yes, but his water systems, though still in use, were uncredited. The pipes carried water as always, invisibly, dependably. In one corner of Versailles, water still flowed through channels he had marked, pressure he had calculated, joints he had sealed. Below the chatter of tourists and gardeners, it ran silently. His grave, shaded by ivy, lay undisturbed. No tribute needed. His life's work moved forward in every trickle. In the countryside outside Chartres, beneath the flagstones of a forgotten farmhouse, an old well was discovered during foundation work. It had been sealed, likely sometime during the late 18th century. The walls were made of tightly fitted stone, their surfaces darkened by years of mineral deposits. Archaeologists descended carefully, using rope and lantern. Inside, they found remnants of rope fibers, hardened pitch along the walls, and grooves carved in deliberate patterns meant to slow the descent of silt. There was no water now. The bottom was dry and compacted, but the modifications, clearly from the 1700s, suggested a desire not only for water, but for control. The depth was measured, approximately 11 meters. Soil samples were collected in layers. No coins, no tools, just rock and clay. The shaft had likely served a small household for decades, maybe longer. Sealed when it ceased to yield, forgotten afterward. Now, once more, open yet silent, its function ended, its structure intact. In the city of Toulouse, beneath a cracked road surface, not far from the river Garonne, municipal workers uncovered fragments of ancient clay piping. These pipes, cylindrical, narrow, reddish, were fragile, yet many remained whole. Initial examination placed them in the early 18th century. Their joints were sealed with tightly packed cloth, treated with rendered fat. No modern binding agents, no metal. The piping had been placed in shallow trenches, then covered with packed soil. Some sections were lined with pebbles to prevent crushing. Moss still clung to the undersides, where moisture had remained for centuries. Flow tests, done gently, showed that water could still pass. Archaeologists mapped a short length, perhaps 10 meters. No grand design, just a straight run, likely from a rain catch to a cistern. No inscriptions, no markers, just function. The pipes, stored in crates for analysis, rested in a local museum's basement. Most would not be displayed. There was little to see, just clay, just water, once. In Lyon, a team of environmental historians conducted core samples from an abandoned well behind a former bakery. The shaft, approximately 6 meters deep, had been sealed since the late 18th century. Using a narrow-bore tool, they extracted sediment cores in vertical layers. Each stratum was carefully bagged, labeled by depth. Analysis revealed soot layers interspersed with clay and fine sand. The soot indicated air contamination likely from household stoves and early industrial burning. Thin white lines of calcium indicated mineral-rich water. These layers, accumulated over years, formed a slow record. 1 centimeter, 1 year. The pattern of pollution increased steadily in the 1770s. Water samples taken from the well's lowest pooled moisture revealed faint bacterial traces, now inert. The report concluded that the water had become increasingly unsuitable for drinking, though likely used for washing and livestock. The findings were archived, the well resealed, the story, a series of layers. Water told it all, in silence, through sediment. In Marseille's older districts, 18th century engineering notes mention cisterns built beneath a hillside. Their exact locations were never precisely mapped. In 2007, a road collapse revealed one, a large, vaulted chamber carved directly into bedrock. Its floor was dry. The air inside smelled of stone and dust. The chamber walls were lime-washed, their surface still smooth in places. Stains indicated past water levels, now decades gone. The ceiling bore faint marks where wooden beams may have once supported covers. A carved channel along one wall showed the intended flow path for runoff. No signs of decoration, just function. The reservoir had been built to store rainwater, perhaps to supplement fountains during drought. It had likely been forgotten as infrastructure modernized. A municipal team recorded the site, took photographs, then closed the entry. There were no plans to restore or exhibit it. It was structurally sound, but unnecessary. Just a hollow beneath a street, a reservoir of silence. Biologists studying urban biodiversity in Paris occasionally explore tunnels, drainage paths, forgotten channels, storm overflow routes. In 2012, in one such tunnel near the Seine, a faint water trickle was found, clear, undisturbed. Inside lived a small species of freshwater amphipod, similar to a shrimp. It had not been seen in urban waterways for over a century. How it survived was unclear. The water's origin was uncertain. Perhaps an old pipe still fed runoff from a park. The tunnel had not been charted in recent infrastructure surveys. The discovery was noted, but not sensationalized. Samples were taken. A photo appeared in a scientific newsletter. The tunnel remained open, but few visited again. No effort was made to illuminate or protect the species. It remained as it had, quiet, unknown, unbothered. The water trickled onward in darkness. Life, unnoticed, continued beneath the city as it had for centuries. In a dim archive above a courthouse in Avignon, a historian reading 18th century municipal ledgers came across a peculiar entry, dated 1763. It referenced the canals that sing when the rain returns. The phrase appeared in a list of infrastructure notations, short, practical descriptions of drainage and water diversion. Further investigation revealed a network of underground storm channels, long forgotten, carved from limestone and brick. During heavy rain, the air within the tunnels caused sound to reverberate, an effect that produced a low, humming tone. These channels had not been used officially for over a century. Subsequent rainstorms confirmed the report. The tunnels, though degraded, still carried water. The historian wrote a short paper on the discovery. The tunnels were marked on updated maps, but left unaltered. The hum continued, faint and low, only audible during storms. The city went about its business. The canals still sang, quietly. The deeper one studies historical water systems. The clearer the pattern becomes. Pipes, channels, culverts, and cisterns, most were built with little ornament and less permanence, yet many remain. Water systems, when abandoned, do not collapse immediately. They decay slowly. A pipe cracks, but still passes water. A gutter fills with leaves, but clears when rains are heavy. In Paris, Lyon, Marseille, and countless villages, elements of 18th century water infrastructure still exist beneath newer ones. They are neither used nor maintained, but they persist. The water remembers the paths carved for it. Where stone remains aligned, water will follow. Engineers today often find these old systems when they least expect, when soil shifts, when modern drains fail, or when maps contradict reality. Then a faint trickle emerges, and the past is uncovered briefly, but only briefly. Most are sealed again. The old systems go back to sleep, steady, silent, and slow. In Paris, within the quiet administrative halls, not far from the Seine, the Bureau of Hydraulic Affairs maintained ledgers on all known public and private water systems. The office was not large, perhaps 6 rooms in total, but its shelves held hundreds of volumes. Clerks sat at long, shared desks. They worked without interruption, copying reports, updating maps, and responding to petitions. Quills scratched, ink dried slowly. Each document followed a template: location, source, volume, usage. Each entry was reviewed by a supervisor, stamped and filed. Errors were rare, but when found, required rewriting. The filing system used tags of linen with handwritten dates. Dust settled evenly. The air was always slightly cool. No voices were raised. Visitors waited on a bench, sometimes for hours. Water management, in this form, was paper and ink. No pipes were seen. No fountains flowed nearby. But within these walls, decisions were made slowly, methodically, that shaped how cities lived and how water moved. To install a private water source in 18th century France, a courtyard fountain, a garden spout, or a pipe extension, citizens of status submitted formal permit requests. The process required for separate documents, each signed and witnessed. The first detailed land boundaries. The second described the proposed structure. The third included approval from the district's water overseer. The fourth duplicated all prior forms for submission to the royal engineer. Forms were written in standard script, in triplicate, with no allowance for brevity. Once submitted, the paperwork waited in queue. Processing times varied, often 4 to 6 weeks. Clerks noted receipt in a ledger. Approvals were sent by messenger, rolled and sealed. Most applicants waited patiently. Some hired scribes to complete the forms. Others copied older permits word for word, changing only names. Water access required patience. There were no shortcuts. When approved, installation could proceed. If denied, no explanation was required. It was not personal. It was procedural. Each district employed tax inspectors to oversee water usage. These men, referred to as eau contrôleurs, visited homes, shops, and fountains to verify compliance with fee structures. Rates were calculated by pipe width, number of outlets, and declared purpose: drinking, washing, or decorative. The collectors carried measuring gauges, narrow notebooks, and small pouches for coin. Visits were unannounced. At each stop, the gauge was inserted into a pipe or spout. Measurements were taken twice to ensure accuracy. Discrepancies were noted. Fines, if issued, were handwritten and signed. No arguments were entertained. Residents accepted the outcome with quiet nods. Payment could be immediate or deferred to the next collection round. Most homes kept old receipts tacked behind shutters, just in case. Inspectors moved house to house, street to street. Their pace was steady, deliberate. By dusk, they returned to the bureau, books full. The process repeated monthly. Like water itself, it was steady, predictable, essential. In noble estates, fountains were more than water sources. They were symbols. Many remained unused for weeks at a time, turned on only for guests or events. At Château de Chantilly, the garden cascade required a full day's preparation. Servants cleaned the basin, ensured valves were clear, and cranked the system's intake gate. Water arrived slowly, often with debris, and needed settling. Once activated, the cascade flowed for precisely 30 minutes. Afterward, it was drained. Maintenance occurred weekly, regardless of use. In winter, the system was drained entirely to prevent damage. Few residents understood its mechanics. Servants followed instructions from inherited manuals. The cascade was viewed from afar, rarely touched, never questioned. Its purpose was visual, its operation tedious. No one marveled. The guests sipped tea nearby. Water shimmered, then stopped. The system was expensive. Its value lay not in hydration, but impression. Yet behind its stonework, pipes and pressure obeyed the same quiet laws found in every village. In the city of Rouen, a group of washerwomen drafted a letter in 1766, requesting that noble estates upriver limit their private diversions of water. Their washing stones, placed midstream, no longer held current. Soap rinsed poorly. Clothing stayed soiled. The letter, written in careful script by a local priest on their behalf, detailed the problem without emotion. It cited examples, dates, and water levels. Attached was a signed list of 20 names, thumbprinted in ink. The petition was submitted to the magistrate's clerk. It was received, recorded, and filed. No response was given. The washerwomen returned to their task, adapting as best they could. Some rose earlier to catch the flow before diversion. Others hauled water from lower banks. The upstream fountains remained undisturbed. The petition remained in the archive, forgotten until rediscovered centuries later. Its pages were folded, water-stained, but legible. It had not changed water rights, but it had tried, quietly. Certain wealthy homes, particularly in Paris, installed mechanical pumps to draw water from cisterns to upper floors. These pumps, operated by hand or foot, relied on servants for activation. In one such home, the mechanism sat in a stone basement, iron gears, leather seals, and a tall wooden lever. A baker accused a neighbor of redirecting runoff through shared gutters. Water entered only as metaphor, flowing like knowledge, pooling like wealth. Pipes, pumps, and fountains received no attention. Within salons, among books and arguments, the infrastructure below remained untouched. Quiet systems, repetition of pipes, buried not for honor, but for need. Some essays noted the role of water in hygiene or public order, but these mentions were brief. The actual systems, the channels, joints, sluices, were absent. It was as if water emerged from nowhere. Some were forgotten entirely, until the ground gave them back, cracked, overgrown, but still there, still waiting. Where once an engineer counted flow with the tick of a candle, sensors now do the same silently. Not in the stories that make noise, but in the ones that flow unnoticed. Yet outside workers maintained spouts. Women filled jugs, pipes cracked and were sealed. The water continued. Below the floorboards of every library, it moved in quiet arcs. The contrast remained sharp. Above, philosophy. Below, plumbing. Each had flow, but only one could be seen, and only when it failed. These disputes were handled through petitions, witness statements, diagrams. The process moved by weeks, not days. From offices filled with yellowing ledgers and gardens adorned with idle fountains, it is time to close the day. Magistrates reviewed the cases only when schedules allowed. Until then, conditions persisted. Temporary solutions, sandbags, buckets, altered routines were adopted. When heard, the disputes involved little speech. Documents were read aloud. Observers nodded. Judgments were issued, sometimes contradicting earlier rulings. Implementation took time. Enforcement was rare. Most parties adapted long before verdicts arrived. The record, not the result, was what mattered. A scribe copied everything by hand, bound it with others, and stored it in labeled volumes. Few were revisited. Fewer were resolved. Water remained a shared necessity. but its path through soil, pipe, or lawas rarely clear, even less so through courts. To activate it, a servant cranked steadily for several minutes. Water rose through narrow pipes, emerging in copper spouts in washrooms or kitchens. During social gatherings, the pump was activated repeatedly. Malfunctions were common. Pressure loss, valve leaks, or broken seals. When a gala occurred in 1772, the system failed mid-event. Buckets were used instead. Servants fetched from the courtyard. The disruption went largely unnoticed above, though conversation paused briefly when guests noticed the absence of the usual spout trickle. Repairs were made the next day. No changes followed. The pump remained in use for another 20 years. Its creaks continued. Its demands remained unchanged. Every 3 months, Royal Engineers submitted detailed reports on urban water systems. These reports were long, often exceeding 30 pages. Each began with the phrase, "Flow remains adequate. Issues persist." Measurements followed. Pressure readings at key points, levels in cisterns, wear on valves. Diagrams showed pipe layouts. Observations were brief and factual. Iron junction corroding, sediment accumulation at drain. Recommendations included no dates. Implementation was left vague. Reports were delivered in rolled parchment, bound with linen ribbon. Clerks logged receipt, stacked the scrolls, and filed them according to district. Occasionally, summaries were made for magistrates. Few read beyond the first page. The system functioned. Repairs occurred when urgent. Most delays were unnoticed. Engineers did not object. They measured, recorded, and submitted. The process continued, quarter after quarter. Over time, certain phrases repeated exactly. Templates were reused. New problems resembled old ones. The reports continued until the Revolution, when priorities shifted, but water still flowed, report or not. Conflicts over water occurred slowly. One landowner claimed his neighbor's fountain reduced pressure to his own, while engineers built and clerks recorded. Thinkers wrote. Philosophes, like Diderot and Rousseau, debated liberty, nature, and the role of man. As we return slowly from the damp stone tunnels, from the echoing cisterns and worn cobblestones, the story of water in 18th century France is not one of conquest, nor invention, nor sudden brilliance. It is the story of small changes. It is the story of buckets filled by hand, of pumps that creaked in basements, of petitions sent and sometimes read. Some systems were drawn in ink, others were drawn from memory. And as you lay in your bed, the modern hum of distant plumbing may remind you. Water still moves in the dark, quietly, as it always has. The channels are now deeper, the materials different, but the rhythm is familiar. Movement, pause, movement again. Where once a woman carried buckets across a muddy road, a faucet now sings a steady stream. The past, though gone, remains beneath us. Let that thought guide you now, gently, toward sleep. There is no more to know tonight. No more names, or numbers, or scenes. Only the soft memory of water, and the stillness that follows it. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm carry you. Sleep like water will come slowly, evenly, without haste. Good night.